Hello to everybody and welcome in Choco Zone Podcast, second season, episode number 5. We are still in the house of Bean to Bar, USA. We are in Utah, where we meet one of the most famous chocolate crafters that makes Bean to Bar chocolate thanks to a mix between old machines and new technologies. Ritual Chocolate and Robbie, one of the founders. Welcome to the episode number 5 of the second season of our Chocozone podcast. The guest of this episode is a very famous brand in the universe of Bean to Bar, of American Bean to Bar chocolate. From Harvard City in Utah, here we have Robbie Stout of Ritual Chocolate. Hello.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's a big pleasure.
Good. Just we are in the thick of our busy season right now. We're only a couple weeks out from the big, Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday weekend. And at this point, most of our wholesale orders have been placed, but I'm sure they're all going to be piling in over the next 2 weeks. So we're at that time of year where we're busy, which is good.
Usually, we ask our guest to introduce himself by telling how was his life before that the chocolate arrived in the life, and which was your business before.
Well, we got started probably the wrong way around, meaning it was started by myself and my girlfriend at the time, Anna Davies. She's now Anna Sear, actually. And when we had the idea, I was only 24 years old to start chocolate. And that's when we started planning, and we didn't have any money at all, none. Like I was a journalist for a cycling magazine called Fellow News. I spent all my time riding my bike. And part-time, I occasionally worked at a coffee shop. So my experience in the food world at that time was just with really nice single origin coffee and espresso. And actually that sort of interest is what spurred chocolate. I got really into the coffee world, and I wanted to do something similar, but I felt like, okay, there's all this good coffee. I feel like I can get the good coffees that I want from all these different roasters. So why start another coffee company? And then just by chance, on a trip to San Francisco, I got to try a few just really interesting dark chocolates. Just was like this spark moment of like, wow, like chocolate actually can be good. Like it's not just a $2, $3 piece of candy from the grocery store. It actually has a lot of potential to be like coffee. And then from then, it was just a full just rabbit hole of exploration.
So your first business was coffee?
Well, yeah, I was just a barista at a coffee shop. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, making drinks for customers. Yeah.
So I guess when you switched to chocolate, there was a small kitchen, something like that. Do you have some peculiar memories about those very moments, first moments?
Yeah, well, I think the standout memories of the time were trying the nice chocolate for the first time in San Francisco. We were at someone's house where they had like a drawer full of nice chocolate. I was like, wow, they have a chocolate drawer. That's cool. And then I think after that, the first batch is memorable, partly because I was able to get cocoa beans. This is 2009. I was able to get some cocoa beans from this coffee roaster who just came back from, I think, Haiti. And he had some Haiti cocoa beans, which are still pretty rare today. Mm-hmm. And in retrospect, I know now that they weren't very good.
Well, do you remember how many tests you did before you get to, the sample that you enjoyed?
Well, actually, it would have been the next batch, because after that, no, not the next batch, maybe the third batch, we did the Haiti, which was not good. We actually added powdered sugar, which I didn't realize at the time has a starch in it. to keep it powder, and it made it really thick.
Yeah.
And so then we're like, oh my gosh, we need cocoa butter. But in Boulder, Colorado at the time, there was nowhere to buy cocoa butter in town. So I went to the like the health and body aisle at the grocery store, and I found some chapstick that was pure cocoa butter.
And it cost a incredible amount of money.
Yeah. So I bought like 4 tubes of this like chapstick, pure 100% cocoa butter, added it, got it nice and smooth again.
Okay.
And the chocolate was terrible, but it was fun. But and then we brought back these like moldy beans from Panama that we like carried on our backs, and we got home and they were disgusting. But finally we actually got a batch of beans from Finmac in Costa Rica. It was an old farm by Hugo Hermelink. And then we also bought some beans from Bertil Lackason, just like a small amount, like, a kilogram or two kilograms. And that chocolate was really good. And we learned quickly that you don't even have to be that good at making chocolate. And if the beans are good, it's going to taste pretty good.
The first rule of a chocolate maker. Yeah. Let us know something about your brand, the origin of the name, your company, and where are you located. And I think that it is one of the best place for chocolate, no? For humidity, temperature, isn't it?
So I'll start with the name. We struggled for a long time. We're like, well, what do we do for a name? Do we use like a family name? My last name is Stout, Stout. That could have been kind of nice because it usually refers to a type of beer. And my family had been making candy and chocolate since like the 19 teens, so 19 in Salt Lake, Utah. And their last name was Hall, and that's what they called their business. And we're like, well, do we go with a family name? And finally, we're like, no, let's go with something original. And what we were really inspired by in the beginning was the history of chocolate, meaning like with the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Olmecs, and how to them chocolate was their most important like food substance. It was a currency, it was a ceremonial drink. To them, it was like their sacramental wine. And what was sad to see was what had happened to chocolate during the Industrial Revolution with Hershey and these big companies that came in, and really it turned into a race to the bottom with these big companies. They just want to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Mm-hmm. And finally we ended up with what we had today, which is just cheap candy that doesn't taste anything like the original product. So we felt like we wanted to kind of bring back that importance, right, of the cacao. Like, this is an important ingredient. It has history. It has cultural history, and so rituals. I like the name. The name itself has the word rich in it, as in like a rich dark chocolate. It's sort of embedded in the sound. And we just liked the sound of it and felt like then we actually got started in Boulder, Colorado, with really like no money at all, like $50. Okay. I sold my drum set. She sold her bass guitar. We started a waffle stand to raise money for the chocolate company. So we actually used to travel to bike races and sell waffles in order to like raise money to buy chocolate equipment. And then we were probably the luckiest chocolate makers on the planet, because 20 miles away was Steve DeVries, who had built a small chocolate factory and hadn't making chocolate for a while. And we had met in Costa Rica on a trip. And he basically offered, he said, hey, like, I'm not really using the factory. maybe you guys could rent it from me. In that way, rent is covered and he can continue to work out of it. And so we did, so January 1st, 2011, we signed a lease, started paying rent. And the rent was much higher than we could afford. And the beans, everything was too expensive. And we didn't even have a brand yet. We didn't really have packaging and stuff. But we were, in there making chocolate. And because we didn't have bars, we were just selling these little discs to coffee shops in a jar. So we're like, well, let's just make discs, sell them to coffee shops, get the name out, get people to try it. Because at the time, back then, it was really rare for a normal person to pay $8 for a chocolate bar.
Sure.
And we knew that would have to be the cost. And so we're like, well, we're this new brand. We have no, history. People in Colorado have no clue what craft chocolate is yet, because there weren't any other companies at the time besides Steve, but he wasn't selling at the time. And so we're like, the only way we could get anyone to try this is if we sell it for $1 a piece, this little piece.
Yeah.
And then so we got a good sort of coverage in coffee shops with that. And then finally, after a few months, we created a bar. We printed all the labels at home at first, and we cut them, at home, as bare bones as you can imagine. Finally, we started going to our local, Kinko's, which is now out of business, and they were printing for us and cutting, but we were still taping the labels and wrapping with foil, and
it was tough, but funny.
Yeah, looking back, it's kind of funny that's how we started the business, because once you've been in business for a decade, you sort of realize how you should start a business. Maybe with some money, maybe with some design and branding and all this stuff. Yeah, you learn a lot over a decade.
Which are the original beans that you use the most? Do you find some origin that are better for a particular kind of bars, while other are more useful for something different, or it is just a matter of taste and the recipe that you can create, and with any origin you can do anything that you want?
Well, when we first got started, we got started with Costa Rican cacao from Finmac that Steve DeVries had actually dried himself. He went down, they finished fermentation, they actually loaded up the beans onto a truck and drove across the country to a drier part of the country where it didn't rain as much, and did the drying there. So we bought 2 tons when we got started, which is a lot of beans.
A lot.
And we had to borrow money from family and friends and just anybody who could help to just buy these beans, because they were available and they were just sitting in this warehouse in Denver. And so everything we learned about making chocolate was with these beans. And just by chance, these beans were pretty high in cocoa butter, which was nice. So we started out as a pure 2-ingredient company, and we were really committed to that in the beginning. And then also these beans were, I don't know if they were high acid or high tannin or something. There was something going on that there was just, maybe we just didn't roast them long enough. We started by roasting really low, low and slow. And
which recipe? Which was the percentage of cocoa?
75%. Yeah. And so we used to not really have too many tempering problems. It flowed pretty well. But then as soon as we started to branch out to other origins like Madagascar, Ecuador, our cacao from Palau, Ecuador, a few years ago was really, really thick. You couldn't even imagine how thick it was. It was like cement,
Yeah.
And we did do 2-ingredient with that for about 2 or 3 years. And then finally, after breaking so many molds from smashing them to get it to flatten out, we were like, we can't do this anymore. So we started adding some cocoa butter to our thicker single origins. We still have two ingredient bars, which are the Marañón Peru, which is really high in fat. It's practically water. It'll splash the ceiling, from the conch.
Yeah. Colombian, no? Colombia normally does that, no?
Yeah. And then our Belize, the Maya Mountain is really high in cocoa butter. So those two are still two ingredient.
Where do you get the cocoa butter?
Usually a variety of sources, but we have purchased from some of the Camino Verde cocoa butter.
Okay.
And then we have purchased some of the Coco Camili cocoa butter from Tanzania.
Awesome.
Trying to think. Oh, we used to get this fair trade organic cocoa butter from Mexico, but I really didn't like the flavor of it, so we switched.
Anyway, it is really interesting this experience, because the people that start to make bean to bar normally want to try to do the two ingredient, and you are explaining that not all the origins, not all the cocoa beans could be right to do the two ingredients, and
there is nothing wrong in adding cocoa butter.
Yeah.
I think if you were a company that was completely 100% committed to two ingredient, I mean, maybe one way you could do it would be to adjust the percentage of that bar. So if you're like, okay, my Ecuador is really low in fat, the only way this chocolate's going to flow is if it's a 90% cacao. So maybe they just make their Ecuador 90%, maybe they make their Peru 70%, and that's how you judge your percentages. But then what we like to do is I have all of my origins at 75%, because I want them all to be like the same. That's our our constant in terms of being able to taste the differences. So
are you used to personally look for cocoa beans? I mean, do you meet in person the cocoa farmers? Is something that you are interested in, meeting different farmers? And do you think that compared to the big companies, when they go to the farmers, probably they have, very special agreements that is very good for them, but not as good for the farmers? Do you think that you, as an artisan, can bring something more to the quality of their business? I mean, of the cocoa farmer business?
Yeah, I mean, we are willing to pay. The numbers are pretty high now. They're like 4 times or 3 times fair trade price. We had an origin, like a temporary one, like a Trinidad special edition, where we paid, I think, $7 or $8 a pound.
Wow.
And that was this farmer's entire harvest, right? So we bought all the beans that he had grown for this incredibly high price. And so for that farmer, yeah, we could make a positive difference. The difference between a company our size that's buying maybe 30 metric tons a year, and we're growing every year, so who knows what it's going to be next year. But the difference between us and a really big company is these big companies, in order for them to secure the supply of cacao that they really need, I mean, they're going to go to a company like, let's say, Maya Mountain Cacao. Probably not Maya Mountain because the price is high, but they're going to say, hey, can we buy like all of your supply? And if so, here's the price. And is this okay? And so they can buy full container loads, every day if they want. And they kind of have to have those relationships in order to secure all of the cacao. When we got started, we thought, okay, we're going to travel to the tropics. It's going to be fun. We're going to learn Spanish. We started taking Spanish classes in the beginning because I don't, speak Spanish. I can actually like read Spanish, okay, but I can't speak it.
Okay.
And we thought like, okay, we're going to be in the factory making chocolate. We're going to be traveling to the tropics. But the reality ended up being, okay, we have no money. We're living on like $9,000 a year to eat and pay rent, and we'll never travel again, basically. But we have traveled to Costa Rica and around there. We've been to Peru and visited our growers down there. We've been to Maya Mountain in Belize. And we're just, it's just tough. It's like, we're busy here. Now I've got a 7-week-old baby. I'll probably never leave again.
These years, this period of our lives, it's very focused on sustainability. Okay, so everybody's talking about sustainability, the climate issue. We are more focused on this. I know that in your company you have some sustainable practices that you apply. And I would like that you share some of them. I guess something is connected to the process, I guess. And I read in your website something like a Recycle Utah Green Business Program. Can you tell us something about it?
So the Recycle Utah program is they're just an organization that works with businesses, and they get businesses to set like green goals each year. They say, okay, what are you going to do this year to be greener? And so we tell them, okay, this year we're gonna change this, and we're gonna be greener because of it. And the next year we're gonna do this. So it's just kind of like an organization we work with to set these kind of green goals. But one thing, like for example, in our factory in Park City that we actually moved out of last year, when we designed the building, we have a really strong southern sun in the winter because we're so far north. So I put all of our hot equipment, so conch, roll mill, stuff like that, in front of these, big windows that gets all the sun in the winter to keep that room nice and hot. And then I put all of our cold stuff on the north end of the building, so tempering and the winnower, because I don't want the winnower to get hot. There's no windows over there as well. So just, organizing the factory to be solar, efficient. And at the moment, actually, we've always only purchased organic sugar from the beginning. I remember when we first got into chocolate, all the traditional makers would always say, oh, you can't use organic sugar. Like, you can taste it, or like you have to use the pure white cane sugar that has no flavor. It's, it's pure sucrose. And it's just like, well, I don't really care. Like, the taste of organic sugar is actually pretty good, doesn't taste bad.
So there is a way to make a more sustainable business.
Yeah. I mean, the shipping that we do, we try to reduce the amount of shipping material that we can. It's just tough. I mean, like, if you're shipping a physical product, at the end of the day, you can't be 100% carbon neutral. I mean, that's the thing about solid goods, right? Like, if you want to buy this mug, it's going to have to go across the country. It's going to have to get there somehow. Even if you buy it locally, the material to make it locally had to get there somehow.
Sure.
So it's just, when you're in a business of physical things, it's really hard to avoid some amount of carbon, emissions, unless, all the shipping trucks convert to electric, and that electricity then comes from solar farms, and,
We are still far, I think, but we are going there. Yeah. Robbie, which is your main market? Which channel you use to improve your exports? Can you sell also abroad? Do you use dealers, importers? How is it?
Yeah, so I would say we run a complex business. as does every other bean to bar company, meaning we are, manufacturers. We're also a brand. So we have two cafes. So we have a cafe, coffee shop, and retail store here at the factory in Heber. But then we also have our flagship bakery, coffee shop, and retail store in Park City, Utah. Right downtown. So that part of the business alone is difficult. Managing, running two restaurants basically, and then we do a lot online, so direct to customers through our website. And since COVID, that has grown a lot. I mean, that's an actual significant part of our business now, which is good. And then we got started primarily as a pure wholesale company. So we've always pushed wholesale hard to other businesses. So stores, restaurants, cafes. At this point, I think we're in, I really don't know. It could be 600 stores. It could be 800 stores. The number really fluctuates a lot based on time of year. Also, we work with several distributors, and it's hard to know exactly how many stores that we're in. Sometimes, I'll find out we're in some cool store in New York, and I'm like, wow, cool. I had no idea.
Are only in USA or also in other countries?
So primarily USA. There was, we used to do more in Canada, and then Trump came along and started some, tariff war with Canada. And so they stopped buying from us for a while. We do work with High Five to distribute some in Europe. For a while, we work, Cocoa Runners in England. Yeah. And we did work with a German distributor for a while, but they were not really into the bean to bar market. So they didn't really know how to sell it to their customers. And so after a couple of years, that kind of fizzled out. But so we make, 99% of our money from America.
Yeah. And I guess that logistic is quite complicated if you have to sell to foreign countries.
Well, it wouldn't be, but chocolate makes it difficult. I mean, selling chocolate's the hardest thing to do because it melts, It's not like temperature stable. Every other day I'm like, why don't I just sell socks or something? They could just, I can put in a bag and ship it. And
That's all.
Yeah. Anyway, you are lucky. In the last season, we talked with the people from Indonesia, and it was very, very hot temperature. They had a lot of trouble.
To make anything.
Yes.
How important is the technology in the process? I mean, I read something very interesting about you, that you are using old world techniques combined with newer machinery. That's kind of interesting concept, because I get, of course, for the big companies is the main point, technology, automation, everything to produce a lot of product. But in your case that you are smaller than Barry Callebaut or big companies or Lean or whatever, how vital is this technology applied to the process, the production process?
So I've got two parts to this answer. I'll start with the old machinery part. So I have my own personal theory that I kind of live by with Ritual, and that's that when some of this equipment was being designed in the 1800s, the majority of cacao being sourced was still heirloom, like that the kind of cacao that was being sourced was heirloom. It wasn't the, genetically selected high yield varieties that you now find in Ghana and Ivory Coast and all over Africa. Back then they were still buying from Venezuela, from Mexico, like these indigenous types of cacao. And so the equipment they were, designing was basically just like, okay, these are the beans we have. We're going to make, some chocolatey substance out of it. And it all worked well. But then as I think cacao quality went down in the 1900s and volume, went up, the equipment had to begin to be designed to get rid of the bad off flavors, the poorly fermented beans. And really, equipment was designed to strip flavor out. Like the modern day conchas, they're high RPM, they're high heat, they're just high velocity. They're just trying to eject as much of the bad flavor as they can. And what you get after all that processing is what we used to all know is just basic chocolate flavor, like cardboard chocolatey flavor, just kind of that standard flavor. And so the equipment we use, I'm really committed to the 3-roll mill as my main refining process. And just from an engineering perspective, I mean, that's the only type of mill that guarantees a narrow particle size distribution. Because if you send you're sending all of your particles through these narrow gaps.
It must be that size.
Yeah, you will never get a big particle coming through here.
You can bet on it.
Yeah, and you're also not going to get extra small particles either. Yeah. And then we use the longitudinal conch, the really big old one. This one was built at least around 1915, and this one was inside of the Suchard factory in Switzerland from 1915 until 1990. In 1990, Toblerone came along and bought Suchard out, and then when the Tobler group did that, they closed the Suchard factory in Neuchâtel. And when they closed the factory, all these conchas just kind of scattered. They kind of moved around. I think some ended up with Velklin. They have like 4 or 5 of them. 2 of them ended up in this old barn in Hamburg, Germany. And that's one of the photos I sent to you. You should put it in the video right here.
We will do it.
Those are the conchas that Steve DeVries found in, I think, 2003 or 4. And they were just like these rusty old tanks. Because the way that they used to be built was they were these metal tanks sitting on top of brick foundations. And you can't dismantle a brick foundation. You just destroy the brick and move the metal parts. And so we had it refurbished and then had a steel sort of frame built around it. And then we installed, the metal heaters and all that. When the particles all get small enough, they get to a point where the roller starts to just float on top of the particles. Like it's not going to continue to break them down. And also, it's only going to be breaking down the tallest particle as it rolls along. So in terms of like a nice, narrow, even particle size distribution, it's what we like. And we've had some of the expensive tests done. And after roll milling, we're usually around like 10 microns. And then after 3 days of conching, we're only at 9. In terms of average size. So it's not like the conch is really bringing the particle size down a lot. It's more to average out that size and get it sort of narrow. So, and then in terms of technology, I think the newer and better and the more servos and sensors for the tempering side of things, the better. Like that's where I think we want a lot of technology is automating the molding, the vibration, the cooling, and then eventually the wrapping and all that. So I think that's where today's technology is really nice. So,
so we have quite finished, and the last question we do to anyone is how do you see your company in the next 10 years? So in 2030, what about Ritual Chocolate?
It's a good question. A lot's going to change in the next 9 years in the world as a whole. Thankfully, I think people will still like chocolate. Hopefully, with climate change, it doesn't affect the growers too much, and that they're still able to produce quality cacao in high volumes and everything. But the brand, with Ritual, I think will still be growing by then. I think unlike these other businesses like tech businesses and things, we're not infinitely scalable. We have steady growth every year, which is good. We're not going to be the next Hershey or Ghirardelli or, massive chocolate company. I think we'll just continue to grow and do what we do best. And that's all we could really hope for.
And people would keep on eating bean-to-bar chocolate more than commercial chocolate.
Yeah, I think
it's kind of an educational issue. I mean, we as a consumer, many of us do use to, eat cheap chocolate.
What was the difference when you eat Clusiel when you were so young? That you discovered this different chocolate. What is the best difference that you feel?
Well, so I've always been into dark chocolate. I've never had a sweet tooth even when I was a kid. I didn't even like birthday cake as like a young kid. I was like, can I have chocolate chips for my birthday? Because they have the chocolate in them. So I think for me, it was just tasting more than just chocolate flavor. That was nice. But also, I think the experience of eating a nice chocolate bar, you sort of it's like drinking a nice bottle of wine. You're sort of immediately transported into imagining, okay, where this cacao came from, how it was grown,
exactly.
Why it's this way. Yeah, you're transported to the factory where it's made and the care that goes into it. And you just experience it in a different way. You're not eating cheap candy.
And you immediately understand that is something different from the one that you are used to. The flavor, the taste, something different.
Yeah, and it's just a nicer, more fulfilling experience. So, yeah.
Okay, Robbie, we thank you a lot. It has been really a great episode, a lot of information. We thank you for this, and we hope to meet you soon.
We hope you
having me, and I can't wait to see the finished product here.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.